Today's project, we are rebuilding the top end of a Yamaha TTR90cc. The reason why we're rebuilding this, we bought this really cheap for my wife. It's her first bike, and she just wanted to be able to practice on a small bike. She's only 5 foot, so this was a good little starter bike for her. When we bought it, it wasn't running. There's no compression at all in the engine. Found out that it had a bent intake valve, and so we got it running now, but it still doesn't have a lot of compression. We replaced the intake valve, which is on this side, and the valve seat is a little damaged. So rather than taking this to a machine shop and having them machine it, I was able to find a really inexpensive, like new cylinder head. That would have been probably cheaper, or just as cheap as taking it to a machine shop. And now I got an extra head in case something happens to this one. So we've already taken the air box off. It's really easy. There's just 2 screws, one there and there, and then you loosen the hose clamp and pull that off. We need to remove these 4 bolts. We need to remove our carburetor. I'm going to remove it from the head side versus the carburetor side. You just have these 2 Allen keys right there you need to get. Disconnect your spark plug. Remove your exhaust. You have 2 bolts, one on either side, and then another bolt on the back. Then on this side, this is your timing cover. We need to remove these 2, just 2 Phillips. We need to remove the sprocket. We also need to remove these 2 bolts. I believe these are 8mm. Very simple. You can tear this down in probably, I don't know, 20 minutes or less. If you have all your tools set up. We're going to make sure our fuel is set to the off position. We also need to remove this is our chain tensioner. So we need to remove the entire thing, not just the bolt on the top. We need to remove the entire mount, which are these 2. So we'll start with doing that next. We're going to start with the exhaust. These 2 bolts holding on the exhaust to the head, they are 10mm. I've already loosened them. Nothing special about these, just normal thread. There's one on the back side as well. Okay, you follow it up here on the very back. If you want, you can take this plastic off. You remove the seat by taking these 2 nuts off. The seat lifts up. The plastic will lift up as well. There's, I think, 1 bolt that attached it to the front, but in this case I'm not going to remove it. I have a 3/8 inch ratchet with a normal extension and a 12mm bolt. The bolt we're going for is this one right there. So I'm just kind of bending the plastic out of the way and just removing this. Okay, don't lose your bolt. I like to put it right back in the hole where it came from. Okay, we have those 2 bolts or nuts taken off, and the whole thing will just start pulling out. Okay, set that aside. Don't forget your 2 nuts. We don't want to lose those. While we're here, let's disconnect our spark plug. It's like that. Leave it off to the side. Next up, we will do our carburetor. For our carburetor, we're using a size 5 Allen key. I'm coming in at this direction, just loosening that one, and then there's one in the back I loosen as well. Okay, we're going to take those off. Probably have to put the camera down to get the second one off. But we'll go ahead and take that off as well. Make sure your petcock is turned off in the off position, and we're going to pull this fuel line, and it'll probably spray a little bit of fuel if you didn't run it dry, and that's okay. Get that out of the way. There's our fuel. Okay, all I'm going to do next is just remove that rear bolt. I've got to put the camera down in order to reach it, but that's it. I have a vent tube coming off the carb right here. I'm just going to pull that out of the way, and we're just going to kind of move this up and out of the way. Just connect your two cables for your carb heater. They're just these two right here. They just pull off, nothing special. No need to disconnect your throttle cable or your choke. We'll have plenty of clearance to get the head off with those still in place. Okay, next step up. Oh, and don't lose your gaskets. This gasket goes underneath there. If you bought a top end kit, it'll come with new gaskets, so just keep that in mind. Next up, we're going to use a size 5 to remove our chain tensioner. It's just these two bolts. The whole assembly lifts out. If you want to make your life a little bit easier, you can take this little choke tensioner, unscrew that, not choke tensioner, just hold it in place. Move that out of the way. That'll free up some real estate for you to get your size 5 Allen key on these two bolts. Don't lose your copper gasket there. Okay, lift the entire assembly out, set it down. What I do is I just take all my hardware and put it right back to where it goes. This is the old gasket. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're actually going to take off the head. Actually, sorry, we're going to take off our timing chain cover. So these are just two Phillips screwdrivers. We're just going to pull those off. I use a size number 2 Phillips head. Just broke them loose. Make sure you use the right size screwdriver, because you don't want to strip the head off of them. They'll be real difficult to get off. Once those are off, you should be able to pull this cover off with it. Oops. Okay, there's a gasket right there. Okay, next up we're going to take off this. This is your camshaft timing sprocket. We're going to remove that. Best way I found to loosen that, take a 17 millimeter, set it on there. You have to break it loose. It's just left-handed, or turn it to your left. But you can't, if you just spin it, a lot of times your piston will move up and down, up and down. So what I found you can do most of the time, set it on there, turn it around until it starts getting to the compression stroke, and then you basically impact it. So you can just get it where you start turning to the left, and then take your other hand and kind of smack it down, and then a lot of times that'll break it loose. If that doesn't work and this thing just keeps spinning, what you can do is you can take out your spark plug, and you have to stop that piston from raising to the top. And so one method of doing that is you can take some like rope, something that's not going to leave a lot of crap behind, so maybe like a synthetic rope, paracord, and stick it in and just kind of keep pushing it down there to take up space. And so when that piston tries to move to the top, it's going to hit that rope and not allow it to move anywhere. You don't want to stick a screwdriver down there, because you can scrape your cylinder wall or the top of your piston. So do something soft. You could take like maybe like a little bamboo stick, or something you use for barbecuing, like a skewer. and stick that down there, but rope's just really simple. So anyway, 17 millimeter. Remove that. Okay, set that down. Next, we got to remove this. So that's just going to pop off like that. It's really helpful to have just a little pick like this. What we want to do is we want to make sure that chain doesn't fall all the way down into the crankcase. It's usually not that difficult to do, but what I'll do is I'll take my little pick, kind of work that chain off just like that, and there's my camshaft sprocket. Again, set that down on a clean rag. We don't want to put that on a dirty shop floor because that is part of the internal engine. We don't want crap in there. We're going to take our chain, we can just kind of loop it over there like that. You can even, for fail-safe, take your nut, or your bolt in your washer, I mean, put it in there. That'll help hold that chain out. Okay, so now that we have the sprocket out, the only thing holding the head to the cylinder are our 4 head bolts and these 2 small bolts, smaller bolts. So next up, we're going to be taking off the head. This part's pretty easy. We have 4 bolts that are 12 millimeter, 2 bolts that are 8 millimeter. Okay. There's a specific sequence that they want you to loosen them in. It's basically a star pattern ending with these 2. Found it's a lot more important when you're tightening it than when you're removing them, but you can just kind of take them off in a star pattern a little bit at a time. That's just fine. Okay, so we've loosened them all. There are copper washers underneath all of these as well. We don't want to lose those. And if you want, you can take all your plastics off when you do this. If you feel like it gives you a little bit more clearance, that is totally fine, but I found it's really not necessary. Just more unneeded steps. Okay, here's your 8 millimeter bolt. I think I was calling these bolts before. These are nuts. These are your 12 millimeter nuts. Grab an extension. This bottom one's kind of recessed, so it can be a little bit of pain to get out. Okay, there you go. We still have our 4 copper washers sitting on top. You can remove those now if you wish, so you don't lose them. We need to take our timing chain and flip it to the outside because we don't want it getting caught when we remove this. And we're just going to take the entire thing, slide it forward. Okay, and there goes one of our washers. We're just going to let our timing chain kind of dangle there. Okay, here's our washer. Get all 4 of them out so we don't lose them. Okay, there's our head. Okay, from here, if you want, you can replace your cylinder gasket. Everything's already disconnected at this point. What you would do, you just pull this, keep this kind of out, and this whole thing will slide off as well. And there's just a little paper gasket underneath there. I'm not going to do it this time. I did it when I originally rebuilt this, so I'm going to keep it as is. But let's go ahead and head inside and look at rebuilding the new cylinder head now. Alright, once we remove these covers, you're going to see our rocker arm with the valves right underneath. In order to get these valves out, we have to remove the rocker arm. In order to remove the rocker arm, we have to come in through this side and pull out. It's like a little sleeve in there. So the official way of removing those is you get a special slide hammer, you thread it into the arms, and then you slide hammer it out. But I'm going to show you a lot easier and a lot cheaper way that you can do for about $3 that you can get anywhere from your local hardware store. What I found is best, you take, I believe this is a metric 8 by 1.25 thread, and you get a nice long bolt fully threaded. You get a coupling nut, which is this right here. It doesn't have to be a coupling nut, but it makes it a little bit easier. And then you're going to get yourself just a small steel plate. What we're going to do, we're going to insert this, and we're going to thread this into that little arm that we got to pull out. It's going to thread in right there. Once we get it threaded in far enough, we're actually going to tighten, or we're going to turn this to the right, and it's going to pull the entire thing out. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get it started in there. Okay, so it's started in there now. And since this front is a machined surface, what I like to do is I like to take like an old glove or something and just stick it between it and my steel piece. That way I don't scratch up the surface. I'm just going to tighten that up. And I've had this out before, so it's probably going to be pretty easy. But sometimes, like on my old Yamaha Kodiak, I actually had to stick my whole head in the oven to allow some of that metal to expand before it would release. So sometimes they can be kind of hard. But all I'm doing here, taking and tightening this, and it's just literally pulling out that arm. This is a very easy way of doing it, very cheap, and I think I probably actually prefer this over a slide hammer. Seems like it's a little bit more controlled. You don't risk pulling out the entire thing, because you don't need to pull out the entire shaft. You can just pull out enough to start loosening that rocker arm out. I can already feel that rocker arm's getting ready to release on one end. On the side here. Notice while I have this thing on my counter, I actually have not only a plastic bag, but I have a paper towel and everything underneath that, because the bottom of this is a machined surface as well. So I don't want to accidentally push down and scratch that machined surface, especially that machined surface, because that's where our head gasket goes. So it would be very easy to mess that up. Okay. So now I have it to the point where both of them are sliding together. As I tighten this, it's sliding the entire thing. So what you can do, you can just take your other wrench here, hold that on, and just do the exact same thing. These can be very, very tight when pulling out for the first time, especially if you have a lot of miles on it. Another thing too, it could be, I've noticed by having this glove underneath here, a lot of times that glove will get caught in the threads, make it feel like you're really struggling with it, but most of the time it's just the glove. Okay, I've tightened that enough. Now where the rocker arm has totally released in there, So now all I'm going to do, I'm just going to loosen this whole thing, unscrew this bolt. You can unscrew this if you want right now, but you can just unscrew that one and just extract that bolt, and then we'll be ready to take off the other side. There's a picture of this one removed, and now we just need to do that one. I'm not going to show this process, it's absolutely identical. Got both of them out. We can remove our actual rocker arms now, so they'll usually just pull out like that. Sometimes the intake's a little bit easier to actually remove from the exhaust side. This one kind of fights you a little bit. So you can remove this, or you can just push it back and remove it from the exhaust side. Either way you want to do it, that's totally fine. Now if you're reusing, if you're just doing a top end rebuild and you're just putting in new valve seals and lapping valves and everything like that, make sure you mark these. So this was exhaust, this was intake. Make sure you just put them back in the same order. Next up, we're going to be removing our valves with our keepers, and I'll show you the method I use for that. So in all of my projects and most of my videos, I stress safety and safety glasses, but this is one of those times where you really do want some safety glasses on, because we're going to be releasing this spring, and there's two little valve keepers under there. And although the springs aren't that strong, as you'll see in a minute, they do have enough force that if that valve keeper got in the wrong spot, it could flick up and get you in the eye. And so wear safety glasses on this. So what I've done here is I have just some needle nose vice grips, and I've kind of clamped onto the top of that the valve, and I put just a little magnet on here. And these springs are not super strong, and so they're pretty easy to release by hand. You can buy different tools. I have a nice little Lysol tool that'll remove them, but this is just super easy. So we're going to be doing the exhaust side first. So what I do is I just use my wall here to kind of help push against it. You want to take a bundled up, just whatever, to place underneath the valve, so as we push down the valve doesn't go with it. So I'll kind of put that in place now. Okay, and don't forget, machine surface, so put something soft on the bottom. Okay, and what we're going to do, I'm just going to push down. You don't have to do it fast, you can do it nice and slow, and that magnet on there will hopefully grab both of those valve keepers and remove the valve. So let's see if we can do that now. Okay, so it got one keeper out, so we're going to set that aside. I'm going to stick my magnet on the other side of the pliers now, and hopefully get the other one. And there we go. Okay, so now we have our valve and keeper out. We're just going to set this off to the side and just rinse and repeat for the other side. I'm not going to show it, but it's the exact same process. Okay, we have both springs out of the way now. The valves will just push out now. Just going to push it from the top end out. Gently pull it out. We don't want to destroy our valve guide. Sometimes you have to twist it out. Okay. This is the intake side, and this is the exhaust side. Okay. Quick little tip. Apart from, looking at, okay, this is my exhaust, that's my exhaust gasket, and this is my intake. Apart from that, if you're ever confused on which one's intake, which one's exhaust, look at the sizes of them. So I'm going to set the two sizes side by side. Okay. Typically, if they're two different sizes, your exhaust is going to be the smaller one. The reason for it is because when you're gases are escaping through the exhaust, they're under pressure, and so they don't require a huge opening to escape from because they're under such pressure, whereas the intake, it's only being pulled in by vacuum, basically by 1 atmosphere, and so they make a larger diameter because it doesn't have all those explosive gases behind it forcing it out. So just a little quick tip on how to figure that out. Because since I'm switching heads over, I need to remove my camshaft. That's not typically a step that you're going to take if you're just rebuilding your own cylinder or your cylinder head, but there is a bolt right there we need to loosen, and we'll pull that entire camshaft out. So we'll do that next. Let me get I believe this is a size 5 tool again. Just get it in there. This one's going to be a little bit tighter because from the factory they put Loctite on it. What we're removing here is just the keeper to keep it held in place. Okay, remove that. And since we have our rocker arms out, this whole thing should just slide out like so. Okay, you want to be extremely careful on these surfaces that you don't bang them up or get dirt or debris inside, because that'll cause problems long term. And we're just going to reassemble it, basically in reverse order. And in this case, there's a key. Basically, it's slotted on your camshaft. And to make your life a little bit easier, you want that basically facing down, because when we reassemble, it's going to need to be in that position anyway. So you just make sure your surfaces are nice and clean. This is already nice and lubricated up because we took it out of one that was already running. I'm just going to very gently push it in there. Don't force anything. And it sets in just like that. And we'll just take our keeper as well, put it right back in the same place, and just reassemble.